Ever since they were first painted in 1962, Andy Warhol's Campbell soup can paintings have captivated generations of art lovers.
Split pea. With him!
But what are these paintings really about? And why are they so important? Well, it turns out that Homer's reaction is actually not that far off. So stick around, because if you've ever opened a can of chicken noodle, or, yes, split pea with ham, then you can understand Andy Warhol's Campbell soup cans. Andy Warhol's Campbell soup can paintings are some of the most famous images in 20th century art. By painting a flat image of a recognizable brand, Warhol was embracing mass culture and turning away from the previous generation of artists who favored abstraction. But Warhol painted a lot of different products throughout his career, and the Brillo boxes didn't end up on The Simpsons. So what was it that made the Campbell soup can so special? Well, commercial products have cultural significance beyond their function. I mean, how do you feel when someone offers you a bottle of Poland spring water versus a can of La Croix? Are you watching this on a Mac or a PC? Do you buy Gold's mustard or Grey Poupon?
Pardon me, would you have any Grey Poupon?
But of course.
These brands have different meanings for us based on our personal associations with them and the way they're marketed to us. And the same is true of Campbell's soup. And it was these symbolic meanings that allowed Warhol to create paintings that challenged long-held assumptions about what kinds of objects belonged in an art gallery. So grab a spoon, because today we're going to tell the story of Andy Warhol's Campbell soup can paintings. How they came about, why they were so influential, and how Warhol used what people thought about soup to change the way people thought about art. Andy Warhol came to New York City in the mid-1950s to work as a commercial illustrator in the advertising business.
I can almost picture it.
Now, at the time, the New York art world was dominated by abstract expressionism. And these were people like Jackson Pollock and Joan Mitchell, Willem de Kooning, and Lee Krasner. Now, abstract expressionism was all about the primal mark of the artist, smearing and splattering paint across raw canvas. Then, in the late 50s, a new group of artists came along that felt that art shouldn't be about drips and drops and slashes and marks, but about real things people would encounter in their daily lives. And these were artists like Jasper Johns and Claes Oldenburg.
Claes Oldenburg.
He must be 100 feet tall.
This new group felt that art should engage directly with popular culture, hence the name for the new movement, pop art. Now, by the early 1960s, Warhol had had enough of advertising and decided that he wanted to pursue art full-time. So he started making paintings, borrowing motifs from things like comic books. But by 1961, Warhol was beginning to feel like he was getting left behind, while other pop artists like Oldenburg and Roy Lichtenstein were making the New York art world want to hit like and subscribe. He said suggestively. Warhol needed something to stand out. So one night at a dinner party, so the story goes, an aspiring art dealer named Muriel Latow told Warhol she'd give him an idea in exchange for a check for $50. Latow told him he needed to paint something you see every day that everybody would recognize. Something like a can of Campbell's soup. Well, the next day, Warhol went to the supermarket, got one of every variety of Campbell's soup, and for the next 6 months, that's all he painted. The Campbell soup paintings were first shown at the Ferris Gallery in Los Angeles in 1962, and initially the paintings inspired a lot of backlash. There were satirical cartoons, and the LA Times wrote, "This young artist is either a soft-headed fool or a hard-headed charlatan." But savvy gallerists like Leo Castelli, they saw that Warhol had just started a revolution. In November of 1962, Warhol had his first one-man show in New York, and by early 1963, his paintings were hanging at the Guggenheim. And from there, it was off to the races. Warhol discovered screen printing and set up the factory, and there was Marilyn and Mao and Elvis and Coke, and there was pioneering video art and the Velvet Underground. But all of it all started with Campbell's soup. And so, what was it that made a bunch of paintings of cans of soup so revolutionary? When Andy Warhol began painting Campbell's soup cans in 1961, the pop artists were still working to get out from under the shadow of the abstract expressionists. And what made the Campbell soup cans so great is that they basically go out of their way to be the exact opposite of abstract expressionism. Now, as the name implies, abstract expressionist art is abstract, which means it's just an arrangement of lines and shapes and colors rather than being a picture of something like a person or a bowl of fruit. This approach was based on the theories of a critic named Clement Greenberg, who felt that painting should be true to the essence of its materials. At the end of the day, so the theory goes, whether it's a landscape by Rembrandt or a portrait by Morisot, it's still just colored pigment on canvas. So to be truly modern, artists should be honest about this condition. I mean, if a painting is just paint on canvas, then all you should see is paint on canvas. For Greenberg and the abstract expressionists, painting anything recognizable was an act of deception that betrayed the true essence of art. Well, not only is a Campbell soup can recognizable, Campbell soup cans were in every American kitchen, and TV shows and magazines were filled with Campbell's ads. Now, the other key piece of abstract expressionism is expression. For artists like Jackson Pollock, a splatter of paint on canvas is a singular, heroic gesture that conveys the raw power and emotion of the artist. And because it records a unique moment of emotion, each painting is one of a kind. Well, Warhol painted the Campbell soup cans in a flat style that completely removes any evidence of the hand of the artist. I mean, there isn't a single expressive artistic intervention from Warhol, like a brushstroke for instance, to distinguish the paintings one from the other. Just like the cans of soup themselves, the paintings are essentially interchangeable and totally impersonal, a strategy that Warhol even adopted in his public persona.
And then you made, and then I made things like,
And so by being so aggressively boring and commonplace and seemingly uninspired, the Campbell soup cans made the perfect deadpan response to all of the self-important, high-concept splattering of the abstract expressionists. But for as effective as the Campbell soup cans were as a way to troll Jackson Pollock, Warhol probably could have achieved a similar effect by painting any number of household products, as he would go on to do later in his career. But with the Campbell soup can paintings, Warhol was after something bigger. You see, he was fundamentally questioning the entire theoretical framework that held abstract expressionism to be the pinnacle of fine art. And to do that, he needed an object that would send a message.
That's a Sicilian message. It means Luca Brasi sleeps with the fishes.
Okay, well, not that kind of message. Now, for most people, Campbell soup stands for one thing above all else: convenience. This has been Campbell's main selling point since its inception, and it remains so to this day. The secret weapon of a busy parent with a lot on their plate, just trying to find an easy way to get lunch or dinner on the table for the family. And it's not just that a can of Campbell's soup makes for a quick meal. Campbell's also markets its products as a shortcut ingredient in a variety of complicated recipes.
Let me show you something special. For a tender, light souffle, use cream of chicken soup.
I mean, you can even see this reflected in Warhol's paintings. The label on the recently introduced cheddar cheese soup has a banner that reads, "Great as a sauce," too. So Warhol wasn't painting just any everyday object, but he was painting an object that stood for ease and convenience and making difficult things simple. And this posed a big threat to the established art world. You see, for much of the 20th century, there was this widespread sense that important avant-garde art was difficult, or at least challenging. And this idea was fleshed out by, you guessed it, Clement Greenberg in a 1939 essay called Avant-Garde and Kitsch. In it, Greenberg makes a highly classist argument, and that goes something like this. Avant-garde art is about the absolute essence of art itself, and so it is often either abstract, or if not, then very visually demanding, like Picasso or Kandinsky. Because of this art can only appeal to the elite and wealthy members of society who have the time and money to train themselves to appreciate this challenging material. Kitsch, on the other hand, is low art, the art of the masses. And Greenberg's example is Norman Rockwell. This art is simple and representational. because, the theory goes, the peasant coming inside after a long day working in the fields has neither the time nor the money necessary to cultivate the refined sensibilities that one needs to understand avant-garde art. Greenberg sums up this position by saying that kitsch pre-digests art for the spectator and spares him effort, provides him with a shortcut to the pleasure of art that detours what is necessarily difficult in genuine art. And so this theory sets up a central division between high art, which is difficult, and low art, which is easy. And so by painting a Campbell soup can, which just screams easy, and then exhibiting it in the most hallowed halls of the sophisticated art world, like chic galleries and the Guggenheim Museum, normally the home of the most daring abstract art, Warhol was exploding the fundamental distinction between high and low. And this clearly got under Greenberg's skin.
People like Lichtenstein and Warhol, they paint nice pictures. All the same, it's easy stuff. It's minor.
Now, perhaps the reason Greenberg sounds so dismissive is that Warhol's paintings had some troubling implications. So the established art world, which was still aligned with Greenberg and the abstract expressionists, was very protective of its elite status. In Greenberg's theory, the importance of the avant-garde relies on a clear division between high and low. It's only because they were part of a serious, exclusive, refined, intellectually sophisticated world of high culture that Jackson Pollock's drip paintings were considered important and valuable works of avant-garde art. Without that intellectual scaffolding, it's a lot closer to something your 5-year-old can do. So by lobbing a grenade of easy into a world of difficult, Warhol was blurring the line between high and low, and essentially pulling the rug out from under the framework that made Greenberg and the abstract expressionists and their patrons feel superior. And so while it was definitely a break with the art establishment to paint a recognizable object, I'm not sure Warhol would have been so successful if he had chosen something different. It was what Campbell stood for. The feelings we naturally ascribe to it, ease, convenience, uncomplicated comfort food, that helped Warhol challenge the structure of the art world. Now at this point, I should mention, there are other ways to think about the Campbell soup can paintings. By painting such an eminently consumable commercial product, Warhol was highlighting art's uneasy relationship with its status as a commodity. And for Warhol, brand images in general represented a kind of egalitarian ideal of American society. Warhol famously said, you can be watching TV and see Coca-Cola, and you know the president drinks Coke, Liz Taylor drinks Coke, and just think, you can drink Coke too. A Coke is a Coke, and no amount of money can get you a better Coke. So while the specific meaning of Campbell's soup is a key part of these paintings, it's certainly not the only way to understand them. Now, in the generations following Warhol, abstraction would continue to stake out a place of sophistication, and new artists would find other surprising ways of bringing the everyday into the art world. But in 1962, when Andy Warhol first splashed onto the scene, that red and white Campbell's label and all of the cultural associations that came with it were a big part of what made Andy Warhol's soup can paintings pop.